Planning webinar. My name is Dan Bahe, and I am the Precision Business Planning Specialist here at AgSolver. And in today's weekly webinar, we're going to be going over creating a pollinator habitat scenario. And our webinar format is going to change a little bit. Before we were creating individual scenarios on various fields. Now what we're going to be switching to over the course of 3 to 4 weeks, we're going to be taking an individual field and creating multiple scenarios within this particular field. So in this case, we're going to start with the Webster field, and we're going to create a pollinator habitat, and then after a pollinator habitat scenario, we're going to create a tile use case scenario on the same field, and then create precision ag and variable rate scenarios. And so today we're going to stick to our pollinator habitat scenario, and to give you our agenda for today, we're going to select a field where a pollinator habitat zone will be placed. Then we'll select zones and work scenarios representing standard assumptions and associated costs. And then we'll compare ROI on zones and scenarios, and then we'll follow up with any questions anyone might have. And I want to let everyone know that we are in Q&A mode for today, so if you have a question, please type your question in the chat box below my contact information, and I will answer your questions throughout the webinar. Also, if you ever want to either contact myself or the support team at AgSolver, you see my email and the support team's email, and then you can always call my cell phone, which is 319-238-1978, and we can schedule individual webinars and work through specific scenarios within your customer's enterprise or your enterprise. And so we'll hop into the application and begin. And so here's the Webster field that we're going to be working in. And this field has a couple different issues going on within the field. And so in the southwest corner, we have a sandy ridge that runs from northwest to southeast. And so this is the part of the field where it has a hard time yielding over about 50 to 75 bushel in a good year. Here we're looking at 2010 profitability map. And so areas in the northeast and northwest corner, these are areas where there's water management issues. And so tile needs to be installed in these areas to make this area of the field profitable. It's relatively productive soil type. And then we have areas in the field where it is extremely productive. And so this field is located in north central Iowa. And if I turn on Zone Finder and we filter this field at 0% return on investment, you can see all the areas within the field, either where we're breaking even or losing money on. That Zone Finder tool is in the bottom left-hand corner of the map, and then a widget pops up, and we can slide and adjust our scale. So say we want to filter this field at 10% return on investment. You can see all the individual 10 by 10 foot grid cells. We're making either 10% return on investment or higher. So, but we'll get into planning a scenario, a pollinator habitat scenario in this case. I'll move that over to the right-hand side. And what we're first going to do, so we're going to base this off of actual production 2010. So we will click on the green Copy Scenario button, and a new window pops up called Copy Scenario. We're going to base this off of actual production 2010. And really what we're doing here is creating a carbon copy of our actual production scenario and renaming it Pollinator Habitat. Then I will click Save. So the same budget that is being applied along with the same yield data source. So we just renamed it. And now what we're going to do is click on the green Add Zone button. And our drawing tools populate on the left-hand side of the map here. We have a polygon drawing tool, a circle drawing tool, and then a whole field drawing tool, where the whole field is created as a particular management zone. But I'm going to click on the the polygon drawing tool. And I'm just going to place points where we would like to take this area out of corn production and roll that into a pollinator habitat. We can delete points if we place a point in a wrong place. And then by clicking on the first point that we placed, it closes the drawing tool. After we've drawn our zone, we can now import our crop budget or our CRP pollinator habitat but crop budget. So we'll name this pollinator zone. So you can see our zone average yield in this particular area is 119 bushel. What we're going to do, we're going to slide our target yield zone to minus 100%, so we do not have any corn production on this ground anymore. And with commodity price, we'll move that to 0. The CRP payment on this particular area, the pollinator habitat payment is actually $320. And I also want to mention in this case, this is a cash rented farm, but the CRP payment will be going to the operator of the farm. We're going to move equipment to 0, seed to 0, because cost share is going to cover establishment costs. Fertilizer 0. We're not having any crop production. Same thing with herbicide and insecticide. We won't have any crop insurance on that zone. We won't have any interest on that area or grain drying, handling, and hauling. We're still going to have our cash rent, but we're pulling labor off of this as well as custom hire. Now we're going to go ahead and click Save. So we scroll down and say we want to edit our boundaries after we created our zone by clicking on the options drop-down icon right next to our pollinator scenario name. We can edit edit boundaries. And where you see the little pencil inside the square, that's our editing tool where we can move points and square up these edges within this field. And just by clicking Save, it closes that area within the field. So now if we want to analyze that zone performance on the 22.6 acres, we can scroll down and see the before and after. So when we were raising corn on this 22 acres, we were really only having a zone average yield of 13 bushel. And actually that number is supposed to be more like 120. But we have our total zone profit. We went from losing about $181 an acre to now we're making $98 an acre. We went from having a return on investment of negative 25% to having a positive 44%, or almost a 70% change in ROI. We decreased our acreage opportunity ratio along with working capital. Acreage opportunity ratio is representing what portion of this zone is operating against an expected negative return. So 67% of the 22.6 acres. If we want to put a dollar figure to that percentage, that would be our working capital opportunity. And then you can see Our break-even commodity price on that zone is $55. We have our total zone expenses before when we had corn production versus no corn production, and then our change in total zone profit. Then you can see the area within the field. So now we're going to do a side-by-side comparison of our 2010 actual production corn when we were raising corn on the entire field versus our pollinator habitat scenario where we have corn production with CRP within this field. If we scroll down, you can see we went from making $21 an acre to now we're making $66 an acre. We had a return on investment. We went from 3% to 10%. We had about a 55 bushel increase per $1,000 spent, and so this is huge. We're becoming more efficient with our working capital. We reduced our acreage opportunity ratio by about 10%, along with decreased our working capital opportunity by about $11,000. Reduced our break-even commodity price from $4.24 to almost $3.60, where we're at in today's markets almost. We also have less total field expenses. We have less total field revenue, but we're making about $6,500 more on this entire field. And if we scroll to the bottom, you can see how we shift acres from unprofitable to profitable. Then we can also print this page as well. So it's a nice one-page handout, simply a before and after. So now I'd like to open the floor up for any questions anyone might have regarding this scenario. So next week, our intermediate planning webinar will be installing tile in the northeast and northwest corners of this field to try to improve profitability. We hop back to our actual production 2010. We can flip through different map layers within the application. So here we have our profitability map. If we want to look at a soils type map, we can do that as well. Or if we want to see our break-even maps. So like in this case, where we had that sandy ridge and took that out of production and rolled that into pollinator habitat, we would need to increase corn production 138 bushels to break even. Pretty hard to do, but in these areas where we only need to increase yield 14 to, say, 50 bushel, we can achieve that through tile in some cases, and also the operator of the farm was directing what types of scenarios we could create on this particular field. And we have, as well as our break-even commodity price map, where we need $9 corn in certain areas, or we have our expense decrease map. So on that sandy ridge, we need to cut expenses by $604 just to break even, which quite honestly would be money ahead if we paid our cash rent, not planted any crop at all in this case. So this field is in continuous corn production. We can look at soils data chart for this field as well, with acreage amount of that soil type, percentage of the amount, county average yields, as well as organic matter levels and CSR2 values for soil type. So that gives you a picture of where we're heading next week. And I also, so Chris asked, are you using posted CRP rates? And so in this case, yes, the operator actually enrolled that area within this field into pollinator habitat, and the CRP payment was close to $320 an acre. And so, but we do not have the CRP payment rates within the application. And so, but what you can do, you can export boundaries out of the application within our export feature. So if we say within this pollinator habitat, right next to our scenario name, we have an export feature where we can export all the data and information from the maps out of the application as shape files. And so in my family, we were looking to enroll some areas of our farms into CRP buffer strips, and it was really easy to draw those buffer strips within the application and then pull out that zone boundary shape file and then take that to the FSA and NRCS and say, hey, this is the projected area where we'd like to have a CRP placed within our field. And so we can also model up what the cost share might look like on a per acre basis to establish the pollinator habitat or the CRP, and then what you would do, you'd amortize your cost for the seed, cost for establishment. And so, but in this case, the cost share pretty much equaled out the establishment cost. And then we can download that file. If we open that up, that zip file, so here's that zone boundary shape file, the polygon. I do want to mention that after this webinar is completed, it will be posted onto our AgSolver YouTube page, where you can go back and rewatch how I created this scenario on this particular field. And for your scenario, the CRP payments might be different, and the zone shape will probably be different, but it's relatively the same concept of copying a scenario and then drawing a zone within your field and then establishing the correct budget based off of that area. And so I want to thank you for viewing our February 15th Intermediate Planning webinar, Creating a Pollinator Habitat Scenario. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me or the AgSolver support team at support@agsolver.com, and then you can always call me at 319-238-1978. Thank you.